Emily Carter always believed she had the kind of life most people could only dream of. She lived in a cozy white house at the end of Maple Street, where the morning sun painted her garden with golden light. Her husband, Daniel Carter, was everything she had ever wanted: handsome, calm, and deeply caring. He was the kind of man who remembered little things like how she liked her coffee or which flowers made her smile. To everyone who knew them, they were the picture of a perfect couple. Emily was a schoolteacher, gentle and kind, loved by her students. Daniel worked as an international business consultant. His job often took him abroad for meetings, but he always called her before bed, no matter what time zone he was in. Emily felt lucky. She had a husband who worked hard and still made time for her. Every Sunday morning, they would have breakfast together on the patio. Daniel would read the newspaper, and Emily would talk about her week, her students, and her small dreams. Sometimes he'd look at her with soft eyes and say, "You're my peace in this busy world." Those words always made her heart warm, but over time, little things began to change, so slowly that Emily almost didn't notice at first. Daniel started taking more business trips, often with little notice. His explanations were always convincing: a last-minute meeting in London, or an emergency project in Berlin. He'd kiss her goodbye, promise to call and leave with his black briefcase. One evening, as Emily prepared dinner, she noticed Daniel's phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. The screen flashed a message from an unknown number. "The drop is confirmed, midnight." Her hands froze for a moment. Probably some business code, she told herself, trying not to overthink. But deep down, something about that message didn't sit right. When Daniel came home that night, he seemed tired, more than usual. He gave her a quick hug and said he had a rough day. Emily smiled and didn't ask questions. That was how their relationship had always been, built on trust, not suspicion. But now she couldn't help but feel that Daniel was keeping a piece of himself hidden. Still, she brushed the thoughts away. Maybe she was just being paranoid. Everyone said Daniel was lucky to have her. He was the perfect husband, helpful, respectful, and full of surprises. Every anniversary he'd planned something special. Once he blindfolded her and took her to a lakeside cabin where fairy lights reflected in the water. "For my favorite person in the world," he had said, holding her hand as fireworks lit up the sky. How could a man who did such things ever be hiding anything? Weeks passed and life went back to normal, or at least it looked that way. But small, strange things kept happening. Daniel started locking his study room when he went out. He began receiving thick envelopes with no return address. When Emily asked what they were, he smiled and said, "Just business paperwork." He always had an answer, and his calm voice made her believe him, even when her gut whispered otherwise. One rainy evening, Daniel didn't come home at his usual time. Emily sat by the window, watching the raindrops race down the glass. Hours passed. She tried calling him, but his phone was switched off. Just when she was about to panic, the front door opened. Daniel stepped in, drenched and pale. "Car trouble," he said quickly, shaking water off his jacket. She believed him because she wanted to. But something in his eyes was different that night, like he was carrying a secret too heavy to share. The next morning, she found a small cut on his hand. "What happened?" she asked softly. He paused for a moment and then smiled faintly. "Just a scratch," he said. Emily nodded but couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more to it. Despite her doubts, she still loved him deeply. Every night she'd make him dinner and they'd sit together watching old movies. Sometimes he'd hold her hand and whisper, "I don't know what I'd do without you." And in those moments, she felt safe again. She convinced herself that maybe every marriage had mysteries, that maybe she was overthinking. Their friends often admired them. At parties, people would say, "You two are perfect together." Emily would smile and Daniel would wrap an arm around her waist. They looked like a dream couple, but what no one knew was that Emily had begun to feel like she was living in a dream too perfect to be real. One night after Daniel had gone to bed, Emily sat alone on the couch sipping tea. She looked around their quiet house, the family photos, the glowing fireplace, the life they had built together. Everything looked peaceful, yet something inside her felt uneasy. It was as if her heart knew a storm was coming, even before the first thunder rolled. As Daniel slept upstairs, Emily thought about the man she had married, the man who loved her so gently, yet whose eyes sometimes looked like they were hiding a world she didn't belong to. She didn't know it yet, But her perfect marriage was about to unravel. The truth that lay ahead would not only change her understanding of Daniel, but also of herself. That night she closed her eyes beside him, unaware that her peaceful world was already built on secrets. And soon she would discover that the man she loved was living a life far more dangerous and far more complicated than she could ever imagine. The next few weeks passed quietly for Emily, but something about Daniel felt different, like there was a new kind of silence in the house. It wasn't the comfortable silence of two people who understood each other. It was the heavy, secret kind of silence that filled the air when something important was being hidden. Daniel still smiled, still kissed her goodbye before work, still said "I love you" at night, but now his eyes didn't always match his words. He had become distant, distracted. Sometimes she would catch him staring out the window, lost in thought. Other times he would rush to answer phone calls in another room, lowering his voice so she couldn't hear. At first, Emily told herself it was just work stress. Maybe one of his projects wasn't going well. But deep down, she couldn't ignore the growing unease that was settling in her heart. It wasn't one big thing. It was 100 little things that didn't make sense. One evening, Daniel came home later than usual. His shirt was slightly wrinkled, his tie missing. When Emily asked where he had been, he said there had been a last-minute meeting. But his tone was too calm, almost practiced. When she looked closer, she saw a faint mark on his collar like dirt or makeup. She couldn't tell which. "Long day," he said quickly, avoiding her gaze. Emily nodded and smiled, pretending everything was fine, but that night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, wondering what was happening to her husband, the man who once told her everything, even the smallest details about his day. The next morning, she decided to visit him for lunch at his office. A surprise, something she used to do when they first got married. She baked his favorite sandwich, packed it neatly, and drove to the downtown address he had always mentioned. But when she reached the tall glass building, a security guard stopped her at the front desk. "I'm here to see Daniel Carter," she said politely. The guard typed something on his computer, frowned, and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't have anyone by that name working here." Emily's stomach dropped. "Are you sure? He's been working here for years." The guard checked again and shook his head. "No record, ma'am. Maybe you've got the wrong building." She thanked him and walked back to her car in confusion. For the first time, doubt began to feel like fear. If Daniel didn't work there, then where did he go every morning? That night she asked him casually about his day, pretending to be normal. He told her about a presentation and a client meeting, using words that sounded vague and hollow. She wanted to confront him right there, to tell him what she had found out, but she didn't. Something told her to wait. Over the next few days, Emily began to quietly observe him. She noticed how he carefully folded and locked away papers in his briefcase, how he never left his phone unattended, and how sometimes at night, he would disappear into his study for hours with the door shut. When she asked what he was doing, he'd smile and say, "Just catching up on work." One rainy afternoon, curiosity got the better of her. Daniel had left his study door slightly open before heading out to the store. She stepped inside quietly. The room smelled faintly of coffee and something metallic, maybe the old typewriter he sometimes used. Everything looked neat except for one thing. His briefcase was left slightly open on the desk. For a long moment, Emily just stood there, her heart pounding. She knew she shouldn't look, but something deep inside urged her to. With trembling hands, she lifted the flap and peeked inside. Inside the briefcase were several passports. At first, she thought maybe they were for work trips, but then she noticed each passport had Daniel's photo, yet with different names and nationalities. There was also a small black notebook filled with strange codes and a photograph of a man she didn't recognize. Emily's hands shook as she put everything back exactly as she found it. Her mind raced. What kind of business consultant needed multiple identities? What did these codes mean? When Daniel returned, she acted normal, but inside she was falling apart. During dinner, he asked if everything was all right. Emily smiled weakly and said yes, but her throat felt dry. Every word he said after that sounded like a lie. That night, Daniel went to bed early, but Emily couldn't. She sat in the dark living room staring at the briefcase on the study table. The sound of the ticking clock filled the silence. Her thoughts chased one another. Was he having an affair? Was he in danger? Or worse, was he doing something illegal? The next morning, Daniel left for another business trip. He said it would only be for 2 days. Emily watched him from the window as he got into a black car she didn't recognize. The driver wasn't his usual one. Something about it made her uneasy. That night, Emily made a decision. She needed to know the truth, whatever it was. She couldn't keep living in fear and confusion. Her perfect marriage was starting to feel like a puzzle she couldn't solve, and she wasn't sure she wanted to see the picture it would make when all the pieces finally came together. What Emily didn't know was that she was already standing at the edge of a secret that would change everything. The next clue she would find wouldn't just reveal who Daniel really was. It would open a door into a world of danger, lies and betrayal that she could never have imagined. Days turned into weeks, and Emily's uneasiness kept growing like a quiet storm inside her chest. She smiled through her days, went to work, and laughed with her friends, but every time she came home, the air in the house felt heavier, filled with unspoken questions. Daniel had returned from his business trip, cheerful as always, but his eyes, they carried a shadow she couldn't ignore anymore. One Friday evening, while Daniel was in the shower, Emily stood in their living room staring at the closed study door. That room had started to feel like a secret world, one she wasn't allowed to enter. The thought kept circling in her head. What is he hiding from me? When Daniel finally left the next morning for a meeting, Emily found herself walking toward that same door again. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned the handle. The door creaked open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper, ink, and something else, something cold and metallic, like secrets trapped in dust. Her eyes scanned the room. A neat desk, stacks of organized files, and Daniel's laptop sitting quietly beside a locked drawer. She wasn't planning to snoop, not really, but something shiny caught her eye. A small flash drive lying half hidden beneath a pile of papers. It was silver, plain and unmarked, but it looked out of place, like it was meant to stay unseen. Emily hesitated. For a moment, she almost left it there, but curiosity mixed with fear pushed her to pick it up. She slipped it into her pocket, promising herself she'd just look only once and then forget about it. Later that night, when Daniel was asleep, she sat quietly in the glow of her laptop screen. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. She plugged in the flash drive, expecting to find boring business documents or reports. But what appeared on her screen was something she could never have imagined. There were folders labeled with strange names. Operation Northwind. Targets, secure files. Each one was locked with a password. Her fingers shook as she tried to open a few random ones, but they all asked for access codes. Then by accident, she clicked a small video file that didn't have a lock symbol. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy footage of Daniel, her husband, standing in a dark alley speaking to 2 men in another language. They handed him a small briefcase. His face looked tense, serious, nothing like the calm, loving man she knew. At the end of the video, one of the men said something that made her blood run cold. "You have 48 hours before the next move. Don't get caught." Emily's whole body went numb. Her hand covered her mouth as she stared at the frozen image of Daniel on the screen. It couldn't be real. Maybe it was old footage. Maybe it was part of some project. Her mind scrambled for logical explanations, but deep down, she knew this was something far bigger than business meetings. She clicked through more folders, her eyes wide with fear. There were photographs of government buildings, detailed maps, coded emails, and surveillance photos of people she didn't know. Some were stamped with official seals from international agencies. The realization hit her like a cold wave. Her husband wasn't a businessman. He was something else, something dangerous. Suddenly, Emily heard the faint creak of the bedroom door upstairs. Panic surged through her. She quickly pulled out the flash drive, shut the laptop, and hid it under a cushion just as Daniel's footsteps echoed down the hallway. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked softly, appearing at the doorway. His voice was calm, but his eyes, those sharp, unreadable eyes, studied her too closely. Emily forced a smile. "Just couldn't stop thinking about schoolwork," she lied. "Go back to bed. I'll join you soon." He nodded slowly, hesitating for a moment, then turned and walked back upstairs. Emily sat frozen for several minutes, unable to breathe. She knew he had sensed something was off. The way he had looked at her, half concerned, half suspicious, told her he might have secrets even deeper than she feared. When she was sure he was asleep again, she slipped the flash drive into her purse. She couldn't destroy it. It was the only proof of what she had seen. The next morning, she tried to act normal. She made breakfast, laughed at Daniel's jokes, and pretended everything was fine. But her mind kept replaying that video over and over. Every time Daniel looked at her, she wondered, who was this man she had married? That evening, as Daniel left for another meeting, Emily sat alone by the window. The street outside was quiet, but her mind wasn't. She finally whispered to herself, he's not who he says he is. The truth was out there now, and she couldn't unsee it. Every word he said, every smile he gave her felt different, like pieces of a puzzle rearranging into a darker picture. That night, Emily realized something that terrified her more than anything else. If Daniel truly was living a double life, then by discovering his secret, she might have just put herself in danger, and deep down, a single haunting thought echoed in her mind. If Daniel was really a spy, what would he do if he found out that she knew? Emily could barely look at Daniel the next morning. Every time she did, the image from that video replayed in her mind. Him standing in a dark alley speaking in another language, his eyes cold and distant. She kept asking herself if it was even the same man she'd fallen in love with. Her Daniel used to hold her close and whisper about their future. The man in that video looked like someone who didn't have one. All day she tried to stay calm. She went through her routine, teaching her students, smiling at her coworkers, but her hands shook whenever she thought of the flash drive hidden deep in her purse. She couldn't focus. Her mind was at war. One part of her wanted to pretend she hadn't seen anything, and the other part screamed for answers. When evening came, Daniel returned home looking tired. His shirt was slightly unbuttoned and his tie hung loosely around his neck. "Rough day," he said, dropping his keys on the table. Emily nodded, her throat too dry to speak. As he walked past her toward the study, she couldn't hold it in anymore. Her voice came out soft but firm. "Daniel, can we talk?" He stopped mid-step, turning slowly. "Of course," he said gently, though his expression changed, just a flicker but enough for her to notice. Emily took a deep breath. "I found something," she said, her voice trembling. "Something you didn't want me to see." Silence filled the room like thick fog. For a long moment, Daniel just stared at her. Then he walked toward her, his face calm, his eyes sharp. "What do you mean?" he asked quietly. She took a step back, clutching her hands together. "The flash drive. In your study. I saw what was on it, videos, documents, things that don't look like business." His jaw tightened. "You went through my things?" Her voice cracked. "You lied to me, Daniel. You've been lying for years. Who are you, really?" For a second, the world seemed to stop. The sound of the clock ticking on the wall grew louder, filling the tense silence between them. Then Daniel sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Emily, it's not what you think. Then tell me what it is," she cried. "Because I've seen enough to know you're not who you say you are. You're not a consultant. You don't even work at the company you told me about. So please stop pretending." Daniel looked at her with tired eyes, eyes that held secrets too heavy to carry. "Finally," he said in a low, steady voice, "I didn't want you to find out this way." Emily froze. Her breath caught in her throat. "So it's true?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm not a business consultant." He looked away as if the words themselves hurt to say. "I work for an intelligence agency. I'm a field operative, a spy." Emily felt the room spin. Her knees went weak and she gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "A spy?" she repeated, barely whispering. "Daniel, what are you talking about?" "It's complicated," he said softly. "Everything I've ever done was to protect you." "To protect us?" "Protect us?" she said bitterly. "By lying to me? By making me live with a stranger?" Daniel stepped closer, his voice urgent. "Emily, please listen. I never meant to bring this into our home. But things changed. My last assignment, it went wrong. People I trusted turned against me. And now—" He stopped mid-sentence, glancing toward the window. His voice dropped. "Now they know about you." Her heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean they know about me?" He looked her straight in the eyes. "It means you're in danger. The people I worked with, they think I betrayed them. They'll come after me. And anyone close to me." Emily stared at him in disbelief. "This sounds insane. Are you saying someone's coming for us?" "Yes," he said simply. "Soon." For a moment she couldn't speak. Her hands trembled, her voice broke. "Daniel, I don't understand. I thought we had a life together. I thought we had love. Was any of it even real? His eyes softened and he reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Every moment with you was real, he said quietly. That's why I wanted to keep you out of this. But it's too late now. Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. You should have told me the truth. I wanted to, he said, his voice breaking. 100 times. But every time I looked at you, I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring this darkness into your world. The silence that followed was heavier than words. The two of them stood facing each other, husband and wife, lover and liar, separated by secrets too deep to fix. Finally, Daniel stepped closer. Pack a small bag, he whispered. Don't ask questions. Just trust me one more time. Emily looked at him, torn between fear and love. Her mind screamed at her to run, to call the police, to get away. But her heart, her foolish, loyal heart, couldn't let go of the man she once knew. That night, as rain began to fall outside, Emily found herself standing by the window, her suitcase half packed, staring at Daniel as he loaded a gun into his jacket. It felt unreal, like watching a movie she couldn't escape. In that quiet, haunting moment, she finally realized the truth. Her husband wasn't just hiding secrets. He was the secret, and from that night onward, Emily Carter's life would never be ordinary again. The night air felt different, heavy, electric, full of something Emily couldn't name. Daniel moved quickly through the house, checking the locks, closing the curtains, and packing a small black bag, with the precision of someone who had done this before. Emily watched in silence, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear him speak. Emily, you need to trust me, he said without looking up. We have to leave tonight. Leave? She whispered. Where will we go? He paused, meeting her eyes. Somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't find us. Every word he said felt like a dream she couldn't wake up from. Just hours ago she'd been a normal wife, living a normal life. Now she was married to a spy, running from enemies she didn't even know existed. Emily tried to breathe, tried to steady herself, but fear kept tightening around her chest. Daniel, I can't just disappear. High job, my friends. There's no time for that, he interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. They already know where we live. If we stay, they'll come for us both. Emily stared at him, her mind spinning. Who are they? He shook his head. You don't want to know. Thunder rolled outside and rain began to tap against the windows. Daniel zipped his bag, grabbed her coat, and held out his hand. Please, Emily, we have to go. For a long moment, she hesitated. She wanted to run, to scream, to demand answers. But deep down, she could see the fear in his eyes. It wasn't the kind of fear that could be faked. Whatever danger he was talking about, it was real. She nodded. Okay, within minutes they were in the car. Daniel drove fast, headlights cutting through the pouring rain. Emily sat beside him, gripping her seatbelt, staring out at the blur of city lights. Every passing street felt like a piece of her life slipping away. She finally spoke. Daniel, you owe me the truth. What's happening? Why are they after you? He kept his eyes on the road. I found something I wasn't supposed to, he said quietly. Something inside the agency, corruption, money, betrayal. I gathered proof. They found out. Emily's stomach turned. So they want to silence you? He nodded once. And now that you know about me, they won't stop at me. You're part of it now, whether I like it or not. The car fell silent again, except for the rhythm of the wipers and the roar of the rain. Emily felt like her world was breaking apart one truth at a time. After nearly an hour, Daniel pulled into a dark side road and parked behind an abandoned gas station. He turned off the engine and looked at her with eyes that carried both guilt and love. I have to make contact with someone, he said. An old ally. But I can't take you with me. It's too dangerous. Emily grabbed his arm. No, you can't just leave me here. He touched her cheek softly. It's the only way you'll be safe. There's a small diner a mile down the road. Go there, wait for me. If I don't come back in 2 hours, take the first bus out of town and don't look back. Tears filled her eyes. Daniel, please. I don't want to lose you. He smiled sadly. You won't, I promise. But deep down she could tell he didn't believe his own words. Daniel kissed her forehead, then stepped out into the rain, disappearing into the darkness. The moment the car door shut, Emily felt completely alone. The silence pressed against her like a weight. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The rain grew heavier and her fear deepened. She tried calling his phone, but there was no signal. Every shadow outside made her heart race. Suddenly, headlights appeared in the rearview mirror, a black SUV slowing down behind her. Her chest tightened. She didn't recognize the vehicle, but something about it felt wrong. Before she could think, the driver's door opened and a man stepped out, tall and wearing dark clothes. He started walking toward her car. Panic exploded inside her. Emily jumped into the driver's seat, turned the key, and slammed her foot on the accelerator. The tires screeched as the car shot forward, spraying water behind it. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away. Through the rearview mirror, she saw the SUV following her. Her hands shook as she gripped the wheel, trying to stay on the slick, twisting road. "Come on, Emily, think," she whispered to herself, tears streaming down her face. Then, as if by instinct, she spotted a dirt path leading into the woods. Without hesitating, she turned sharply and drove down it, branches scraping against the car. After a few minutes, she turned off the engine and lights, sitting in complete darkness. Her breath came in quick gasps. She waited. The SUV sped past the road, its headlights fading into the distance. Slowly, painfully, the world grew quiet again. Only the rain and her heartbeat remained. Emily sat there in the dark, shaking, drenched in fear and confusion. The man she loved was gone, hunted. The life she knew was gone too. And now she had to survive on instincts she never thought she'd need. As dawn began to break through the trees, Emily whispered to herself, "I'll find you, Daniel. Whatever this is, I'll find the truth." She didn't know that the next step in her search would uncover not just who her husband truly was, but the dangerous web of secrets he'd been fighting all along. Emily crouched in the small diner, her hands wrapped around a cup of lukewarm coffee. Her hair was damp from the rain and her clothes still smelled faintly of the wet car. The world outside seemed normal. The sun was rising, the streets slowly filling with cars and pedestrians. But Emily knew better. Her life had changed forever. Every face outside the window felt like a possible threat. Every shadow seemed to carry danger. She stared at the door, waiting. Daniel had promised he'd meet her, but the minutes stretched into hours. Each tick of the clock made her stomach tighten. She wanted to leave, to run far away, but something inside her refused. She had to know the truth. She had to know why her husband's life had been built on lies. Finally, the diner's bell jingled and Emily's heart skipped. A man stepped inside wearing a long coat and sunglasses, even though the sun was bright. He glanced around, then made a small gesture, 2 fingers raised. Emily stood, her legs trembling, and followed him to a quiet booth in the corner. "I'm Alex," the man said softly. "Daniel sent me." "You're safe for now, but we don't have much time." Emily nodded, barely speaking. "I need to know what's happening. Who is Daniel, really?" Alex leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Daniel isn't the enemy. He's complicated. He works undercover for a government intelligence agency, not the kind that spies on other countries for personal gain. He's exposing corruption, people inside his own agency who are abusing power, taking bribes, and risking lives." Emily's eyes widened. "So, he's not a criminal?" "No," Alex said firmly. "He's risking everything to reveal the truth. That's why the people after him are dangerous. They're not foreign enemies. They're insiders, people he trusted who turned against him." Emily's mind spun. She thought back to all the hidden files, the passports, the coded messages. Everything she had feared now made sense. "But why me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why involve me?" Alex's expression softened. "Because you saw what you weren't supposed to. That makes you a target, whether Daniel likes it or not. He didn't want you to know. He wanted to protect you. But the moment you found out, you became part of the story." Tears filled Emily's eyes. "I don't even know who he is anymore." Alex reached out, placing a hand on hers. "You know him. You just haven't seen the whole picture. Daniel is loyal, brave, and desperate. He didn't lie out of malice. He lied to keep you alive. Everything else, the deception, the danger, it's his burden, not yours." Emily wiped her tears and tried to steady herself. She thought of the videos, the hidden documents, the secret trips, the danger. Every secret Daniel had kept suddenly felt like a shield, not a weapon. Alex handed her a small folder. Inside were photos, emails, and documents. These are part of what Daniel has gathered. They prove the corruption, the lies, and the threats. This is why he's being hunted, and why he needs you to trust him even now. Emily studied the papers, her hands shaking. She realized how deep the web of betrayal went. High-ranking officials, money laundering, blackmail. Daniel had uncovered something massive. She felt a mix of fear and awe. Her husband had been living a double life, not for selfish reasons, but for justice. As she absorbed the truth, a part of her felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Daniel wasn't a stranger. Maybe the man she loved, the one who had kissed her forehead and whispered that he couldn't live without her, was still there, buried beneath the danger, beneath the lies. Alex looked at her seriously. Daniel is planning his next move tonight. You need to be ready to move with him. Whatever happens, stay calm and follow his instructions exactly. You have to trust him completely. His life and yours depends on it. Emily nodded, determination slowly replacing her fear. She realized that she couldn't run from this. She couldn't ignore the truth any longer. She had to face it, to face Daniel and to stand beside him, even if that meant stepping into danger. The diner door opened again, letting in a gust of cool morning air. Emily's heart raced. Outside, Daniel stood in the sunlight, wet from rain but alive, watching her carefully. Relief and fear collided inside her chest. She stood slowly, moving toward him, clutching the folder Alex had given her like a lifeline. For the first time since discovering his secret, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in weeks: understanding. She finally saw the man behind the spy, the man who loved her deeply, who had risked everything to protect the truth and her safety. As Daniel approached, she whispered, "I understand now." He reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "And I promise we'll get through this together." Emily nodded. Whatever lay ahead, the danger, the lies, the enemies, they would face it together. She finally understood that the truth, no matter how shocking, was a bridge back to the man she loved. And for the first time, she felt ready. Emily and Daniel had barely caught their breath before the world around them seemed to shift again. After hours of careful planning with Alex, they thought they had a path to safety, a way to stay one step ahead of the people hunting them. But Emily quickly realized that in Daniel's world, safety was always an illusion. The night was cold and misty when Daniel led her to a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Shadows clung to the walls like secrets, and the distant hum of traffic was the only sound outside. He said they would meet someone who could help them get access to safe houses and transportation. Emily trusted him, but a small knot of unease had started to form in her stomach. As they entered the warehouse, Emily noticed the faint smell of smoke and the flicker of dim, swinging lights. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and unrecognizable, wearing a long coat and a scarf that hid most of their face. "Emily, wait here," Daniel whispered, his hand on her shoulder. "I need to speak with them alone." Her heart pounded. She wanted to protest, but she knew better. In Daniel's world, rules weren't optional. She nodded silently, gripping the strap of her bag as she watched him disappear into the shadows. Minutes passed like hours. Emily could barely hear her own heartbeat over the sound of distant dripping water and the occasional squeak of the floorboards. Then suddenly voices echoed from deeper inside the warehouse, sharp, raised, urgent. Emily's stomach dropped. She crept forward, peering around a corner, and froze. Daniel was not speaking calmly. He was arguing with two men she didn't recognize. Their gestures were aggressive and their voices were harsh. "Where is the drive?" one of the men demanded. Daniel's eyes were wide, almost desperate. "I don't have it." "You know I never carry it." Emily's mind raced. Drive? The one with all the proof of the corruption? The one that could expose everything? Then she saw it. The men pulled out guns. One aimed directly at Daniel. Her heart stopped. "Emily!" Daniel shouted, turning toward her. "Run!" She froze, terrified. Daniel was being cornered, surrounded by men who didn't care about the rules of life or love. Emily wanted to run to him, to throw herself in front of him, but instinct told her to stay hidden. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, making her hands tremble uncontrollably. A shot rang out, sharp and deafening. Emily gasped. Daniel fell to the ground, his bag dropping beside him. One of the men grabbed him roughly, dragging him toward the exit. Emily felt a scream building in her throat, but forced herself to stay silent, knowing that even a single sound could put them both in more danger. Her mind spun. Betrayal. Daniel had warned her that people he trusted could turn on him, but she had never imagined it would happen like this. Someone he counted on to help had set a trap, and now she had no idea who was on their side anymore. Through the small gap in the doorway, Emily saw them disappear into the night with Daniel. Her chest ached as tears filled her eyes. She wanted to chase them, to fight, to pull him back, but she had no weapon, no plan, and no backup. For the first time, Emily felt completely powerless. Minutes later, she heard the faint sound of a car starting. Alex's voice, calm but urgent, broke the silence. "Emily, we need to move now." Shaking, she obeyed, following Alex through a narrow alleyway toward an old service road. Every step felt surreal. Her husband had been captured, and she didn't even know if he was alive. As they moved, Emily's mind replayed every warning Daniel had ever given her. Every word about betrayal, danger, and secrecy made sense now. The enemy wasn't just outside, it was everywhere. Anyone could be a threat, and Daniel, brave and brilliant as he was, had been betrayed by someone he trusted implicitly. By the time they reached a safe house, Emily was exhausted, trembling, and furious. She sank into a chair, clutching her hands together. "Why would they do this?" she whispered. Alex looked at her with a mix of sympathy and urgency. "Because what Daniel discovered is bigger than anyone imagined. People who think they are untouchable will stop at nothing to protect themselves. He was close to exposing them. Too close. That's why he was taken." Emily closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. She thought of Daniel lying on the cold floor, dragged into danger by those he trusted. She had felt fear before, but this helplessness, this rage, was something else entirely. Then, amidst the fear, a spark of determination ignited. Emily realized she couldn't wait for someone else to save him. Daniel had risked everything to expose the truth. Now she had to do the same. She had to find him. She had to finish what he started. As the night stretched on, Emily went over every detail, every clue, every whispered warning Daniel had given her. She made a silent promise. She would not let the betrayal destroy them. She would track down the people who took him, uncover the lies, and bring him home. For the first time, fear and courage merged in her chest. She realized she wasn't just running anymore. She was preparing to fight. A woman who had discovered the darkest secrets of the man she loved, now ready to step into the shadows herself. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside her. The betrayal had come, yes, but Emily was beginning to understand that it was also a test, and she would not fail.